Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, and what you're about to hear changes everything. She said she was just going out for dessert. That's all. A slice of cheesecake with a few girls from work. Nothing fancy. Just something light and sweet, she added, with that tired little laugh she'd been using lately. The one that sounded like an apology wrapped in lipstick and distance. I remember standing in the hallway, holding her scarf. The green one I bought her in Portland years ago. She didn't even notice it wasn't around her neck. She just grabbed her purse, checked her lipstick in the mirror, and left with a quick, distracted, "Love you." I didn't say it back. Not because I didn't mean it, but because I was busy staring at her shoes. She never wore heels for dessert. I should have let it go. I always do. I'm not confrontational. I'm the type who says, it's fine, even when it's very obviously not fine. But that night, something small and sharp started buzzing in my chest. A little warning, not loud, but steady. So I followed her. Yeah, I actually followed my wife of 20 years. Drove 4 cars behind like a coward, clutching the steering wheel with hands that wouldn't stop sweating. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't go back home and pretend the lasagna in the fridge was more important than the ache in my gut. She didn't go to the dessert place. She didn't meet coworkers. She parked outside a downtown hotel. Got out. Smoothed her hair in the window. Walked in. I waited in the car. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Then a man showed up. Tall. Confident. He didn't hesitate. Just walked straight in like he owned the night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the lobby doors until they closed behind him. That was the moment I knew my marriage had expired. Quietly. Without warning. No crash. Just a soft click. But the real pain? The real pain came when I saw who he was. And you're not going to believe it. I sat in that parking lot for over 30 minutes, the engine off, my breath fogging up the windshield. I kept telling myself maybe they were just meeting to talk. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe the guy was her coworker. Maybe I was just spiraling. But every time I blinked, I saw her heels. The way she walked. Confident. Excited. Not like someone dragging herself out to eat cheesecake with the girls. She was glowing. And not because of me. When I finally gathered the nerve to get out of the car, I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't feel anger or even heartbreak. Just this blank, heavy fog in my chest. Like I had wandered into a life that didn't belong to me anymore. I walked into the lobby and stood near the elevators. I didn't have a room number. I didn't even have a name. Until I heard her laugh. She was leaning on the front desk, playfully tapping her fingers on the counter while the man beside her whispered something into her ear. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I froze behind one of those fake potted plants like an idiot, like a child hiding in plain sight. Then she turned, facing him, and said, "We've got until 2 a.m. Let's make it worth it, Professor." That word, Professor, that was when my stomach twisted. The man, he wasn't a stranger. He was Owen Kellerman, her old college literature professor. A guy she used to talk about with this weird mix of admiration and annoyance. He must have been in his late 50s now, silver hair, smug posture. I remembered him from her graduation photos, back when we were just engaged. He put his arm around her waist and walked her toward the elevator like she was something precious. Like she was his. I didn't follow. I couldn't. I walked right back out, my knees weak, my hands trembling. The cold air hit me like a slap. I sat on the curb and stared at my reflection in the glass of a parked car. I looked like a ghost. Like a man who'd been erased. I didn't go home. I couldn't face the lies she'd tell when she returned smelling like hotel soap and someone else's cologne. Instead, I drove to the only place that felt like mine, the diner near the river we used to visit at midnight when we were first dating. The waitress recognized me, asked where my wife was. I told her she was out celebrating something. She smiled. "Tell her she's lucky," she said. I nearly laughed. But that's not the worst part. When I finally did return home, something was waiting for me on the kitchen table. A sealed envelope. My name written on it. Inside wasn't a confession. Or an apology. It was worse. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. It was just a single piece of paper inside, but holding it felt like cradling a grenade with the pin barely hanging in place. I stood in the middle of our quiet kitchen, hands shaking, staring at my name written in her handwriting. The same handwriting I used to find on sticky notes tucked into my lunchbox when we first got married. Back then, they said things like, "Love you always," or "Don't forget the forks." This one said nothing more than Curtis in thick black ink. I didn't open it right away. I walked around the kitchen 5 times. I checked the stove, though I hadn't cooked. I emptied the dishwasher, even though it was already empty. Anything to delay what felt inevitable. Finally, I sat down at the table, the same spot where we used to eat pancakes on Sundays, and tore it open. Inside was a typed letter. Not handwritten, typed. Like a resignation notice. It started formally, almost coldly. Curtis, by the time you read this, I'll be back from the conference. My chest tightened. There are things I've kept from you, not because I wanted to hurt you, but because I needed space to feel alive again. Alive again. This isn't about you being a bad husband. You've been steady, dependable, safe. But somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling like me. I need time to figure out who I am without being someone's wife. No mention of who she was with. No mention of the professor. Just vague emotional jargon dressed up to sound like honesty. It wasn't honesty. It was avoidance with a font choice. She continued, saying she'd be staying somewhere else for a while. No address. No timeline. She said she'd talk to the boys when it made sense. As if disappearing on your family required the right lighting and soundtrack. The last line hit the hardest. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Make what harder? Watching the woman I gave 2 decades to run off to find herself in hotel rooms with her old professor? I sat there for hours. The lights stayed off. My phone buzzed a few times. Work emails, a text from my sister, probably wondering how our anniversary weekend went. I didn't answer anyone. I just stared at the letter. I reread it 12 times. I memorized every word. Then I folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope like it was evidence from a crime scene. The next morning, the boys noticed. They asked where Mom went. I lied. Said she was staying with Aunt Margot to help with her surgery. I couldn't say the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. How do you explain to your kids that the mother who packed their lunches just 2 days ago was now someone you barely recognized? But that day wasn't over. Later that evening, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the message, I dropped the phone. It wasn't Lorna. It was Owen. And what he said made my blood run cold. His voice was slow, deliberate, and disturbingly calm. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a wrong number. But then he said my name. Curtis, I know this must feel sudden. I didn't want to reach out this way, but Lorna asked me to be the one to explain some of the things she couldn't. I froze. Not just because he used her name, but because it was said with too much familiarity. Like someone referring to a shared memory. His tone wasn't remorseful. It was calculated, like a man used to lectures and authority. I stood in the hallway, staring at the floor, the phone pressed against my ear as he kept talking. I realize you're probably angry. That's understandable. But this wasn't about betrayal. It was about rediscovery. She's not the same girl you married. You must have felt it. The distance, the silences, the way she outgrew things you still held on to. Rediscovery? Outgrew? This man, this smug academic leech, was explaining the breakdown of my marriage like it was a literature thesis. I wanted to smash the phone into the wall. Instead, I let it play. She's going to need time. I know you have children, and believe me, she's thinking of them too. But Curtis, sometimes holding on becomes more destructive than letting go. I'm asking you to be graceful about this. Dignified. Don't drag it into courtrooms or turn it into bitterness. You're better than that. Let her be free. Free? She's not a bird. She's not a prisoner. She was my wife. My partner. My teammate during 20 years of rent payments, school meetings, stomach flus, car repairs, and late-night tears over her mom's death. But now, suddenly, I'm the cage? I'm the one she needs freedom from? I couldn't respond to him. I couldn't scream back through a voicemail. So instead, I sat on the bottom stair of our house and cried for the first time in years. Not the quiet kind, either. The kind that hits in waves, breathless, raw, humiliating. The kind of cry that makes your chest hurt because everything you built is crumbling and you can't do a damn thing about it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our bedroom. No, my bedroom now, staring at the empty side of the bed. Her pillow still smelled like her shampoo. I kept waiting for the sound of keys in the door, but all I heard was silence. The next day, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I took the boys to school, then drove straight to my office and asked for a leave of absence. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't sit through meetings about dining sets and sofas while my life was being erased. When I got home, her closet was half empty. She'd come while we were gone. taken just enough to let me know she wasn't coming back soon. But what really crushed me was what she left behind. On the floor, tucked behind the nightstand, was a notebook I hadn't seen before. It had my name on the first page, but it wasn't a love letter. It wasn't an apology. It was something worse. I held that notebook like it was radioactive. It wasn't fancy, just a spiral-bound blue thing with a bent corner, the kind students use for grocery lists or classroom notes. But my name, written in her cursive on the first page, stopped me cold. Curtis. Just that. No hearts, no date, no greeting. It felt like the beginning of a eulogy. I sat on the bed, turned to the second page, and started reading. And with every paragraph, my vision blurred. Not from tears this time, from disbelief, from confusion, from the terrifying realization that I never really knew the woman I slept beside for 2 decades. Page after page, she had written about me. Not to me, but about me, as if I were a character she'd grown bored of. She called me predictable, emotionally flat, routine to a fault. In one passage, she wrote, Curtis would rather spend an evening reorganizing his sock drawer than touch me without asking twice. I had to stop reading, my heart pounding so hard it made me nauseous. But I kept going. She described the years like they were prison terms. Year 13, he stopped asking what I was reading. Year 15, we stopped kissing with our eyes closed. She cataloged every disappointment, every time I didn't notice her haircut or forgot to buy oat milk. Small things, but in her words, they grew into towering proof that I didn't see her. There was an entry about the professor, Owen. Apparently, they reconnected at an alumni mixer nearly 8 years ago. She didn't plan anything, or so she claimed, but the spark was immediate. She wrote about their emails, their inside jokes, their longing. She described the thrill of being seen again. I read the word alive more than once. That word kept surfacing like a dagger to the chest. But then, on the 32nd page, something changed. The tone shifted. She wrote, I don't hate Curtis. I'm scared of him. Not because he's violent, but because he's so numb. Like a sponge that just absorbs whatever you pour on it. Sadness, rejection, neglect. He never pushes back. Never demands more. It's like being married to a ghost who insists on setting the table every night anyway. That was the line that broke me. Because she was right. I didn't fight. I didn't challenge. I thought being agreeable was love. I thought being steady, reliable, loyal, that those were virtues. But maybe, to her, it felt like being slowly buried under layers of politeness and silence. I gave her peace. She wanted fire. And as I sat there, surrounded by pieces of a woman I no longer recognized, I realized something even more painful. I had disappeared a long time ago. I just didn't notice it. I thought I was still here, living, breathing. But I had become the background character in my own life. The reliable extra. The placeholder husband. I spent the next hour tearing through the rest of the journal, hoping for one sentence, just one, where she said she still loved me, that I mattered, that I wasn't just a chapter she couldn't wait to end. But it never came. What did come, though, was a list of plans. And at the top, a line that read, I'll tell the boys after the transfer clears. Transfer? Transfer of what? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with her journal open in front of me, that one word repeating in my head like a curse I couldn't shake. Transfer. The way she wrote it, so casually, with no explanation, made my skin crawl. It wasn't a word you used for feelings or decisions. It was a word for banks, for transactions, for plans. And she had a whole page of them, mapped out with bullet points and deadlines like a project manager preparing for a product launch. Only the product was our future, and I was clearly not a stakeholder anymore. So I did what any desperate, humiliated, slightly unraveling man might do. I checked our accounts. I hadn't looked closely in months. I trusted her. Lorna handled most of our bills, especially after I'd gotten swamped at work last year. She said she was just more organized, and I didn't argue. That was always the pattern. She'd offer. I'd step back. She'd correct. I'd stay silent. So I assumed we were fine. I was wrong. Our joint savings, the one we started back when Noah was born, the one we'd been adding to every month for college, for future emergencies, for retirement, was empty. Not just low. Gone. Wiped out 2 days earlier in a wire transfer to an account I didn't recognize. $142,800. Every penny. I sat there numb. I refreshed the screen like maybe the money would reappear. Maybe the site was wrong. Maybe there was a filter hiding it. But no, it was real. And the line under it said, "External transfer confirmed, Owen Kellerman." She sent it to him. I felt something inside me snap. A clean, quiet snap. Not loud, not violent. Just final. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally anymore. I was robbed. My children's future was handed over to the man who whispered in her ear in hotel lobbies while I sat reheating pasta and pretending we were still okay. I wanted answers. Real ones. Not another letter. Not another voicemail. I needed to look her in the eyes and ask how long she'd been planning to dismantle everything we built, and how, in the name of decency, she could call that rediscovering herself. But Lorna didn't come home. Not the next day. Not the one after. She ignored my calls. My texts were left unread. When I called Owen directly, he didn't answer. So I left a message, not the kind I'm proud of, but not screaming either. Just enough to let him know I knew. That I wasn't going to just absorb this like a sponge again. Then came the email. From her this time. Not apologizing. Not explaining. Just instructions. She said I needed to speak to a lawyer. That she was moving forward, and that I should too. She said we needed to keep the boys out of the tension. That word again, tension. Like this was just a rubber band stretched too tight. Like this wasn't financial betrayal and emotional theft wrapped in poetic detachment. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the email was a draft separation agreement. She had already filed. She'd filed before I even found the journal. Before I knew about the hotel. Before I opened that envelope. Before I even knew we were over. Which means this had never been spontaneous. This wasn't a messy, emotional spiral. It was a blueprint. And I was the only one who didn't see the blueprint being followed step by step. I stared at that separation agreement until the words stopped making sense. It was all there, typed out like it was some polite business arrangement. Joint custody outlined in vague terms. Property division proposed like she hadn't already helped herself to nearly $150,000. And a final clause stating we both agreed to dissolve the marriage amicably. Amicably? I nearly laughed. She ran off with her old professor, drained our savings, ghosted her own children for days, and now expected a clean, quiet exit like this was the end of a dinner party. I didn't sign it. Instead, I printed it. All 12 pages. And then I drove. Not to a lawyer, not to a friend. I drove to my father-in-law's house. Lorna's dad, Martin, was the kind of man who ironed his jeans and cleaned his lawn mower after every use. Old school, ex-Navy, full of opinions he rarely shared unless provoked. But one thing was always clear, he loved his daughter. And for 20 years, he had always treated me like a son. I didn't know what I was expecting when I knocked on his door that afternoon, but I was done being quiet, done pretending I was okay. I needed someone to look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't insane. Martin opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "You look like hell." I handed him the agreement and said, "You might want to read what your daughter's doing." He didn't invite me in. He stood on the porch and read it, line by line, without a word. His expression didn't change, but I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. When he finished, he asked, "What's missing?" I told him. About the hotel, the professor, the journal, the transfer, every disgusting detail. And for the first time in my life, I saw that man go completely still, like a machine in shutdown. Then, without a word, he walked back into the house and slammed the door behind him. I didn't follow. I got in my car, hands trembling. I thought I'd regret it, but I didn't. I wanted Lorna to feel consequences. Real ones. Not just from me. From someone she thought would always be on her side no matter what. That evening, I finally called a lawyer. Not the one she suggested in her email. Her carefully curated, friendly mediator. I found someone else. A real bulldog. Her name was Dana, and the first thing she said to me was, "You're about 5 steps behind, but not too late." I gave her everything. The journal, the transfer records, the voicemail from Owen, even the damn envelope. She didn't flinch. She just took notes, nodded, and said, "This is going to get messy. You okay with that?" I wasn't. But I said yes anyway. The next day, Dana froze the remaining accounts. She also filed an emergency order to retrieve documentation on the wire transfer. Lorna wasn't just being selfish. She had committed something close to fraud. And depending on how the funds were handled, Owen might find himself answering questions from people with far more power than me. But the real twist? That came 2 days later, when I received a message from an unknown number. It wasn't Lorna. It was another woman, and she had her own story to tell about Professor Owen Kellerman. The message came late at night. No name, just, "Are you Curtis? I think we need to talk. It's about Owen." I almost didn't reply. I was exhausted, emotionally emptied, legally overwhelmed, still trying to figure out how to explain all this to my kids without making them hate their mother. But something told me to answer. Her name was Sabrina. She said she'd been in a relationship with Owen for the past 4 years. Not a fling, a relationship. One that overlapped perfectly with everything Lorna had described in her journal. Sabrina wasn't bitter. She was stunned. Apparently, she had no idea Lorna even existed. Until she found an email, one that Owen forgot to delete, confirming the wire transfer. He said it was from a family member, she told me. But when I found the note attached, signed by your wife, I knew something was wrong. We met the next morning at a cafe near the courthouse. She brought a folder. Inside were dozens of printouts, emails, receipts, even screenshots of Owen messaging multiple women. Lorna wasn't the only one. Far from it. I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or worse. He was a con man in a blazer. He manipulated lonely, drifting women into thinking he was their second chance. And Lorna? She fell for it. Gave up her life, her kids, her future, for a man who saw her as nothing but a temporary thrill. Dana, my attorney, wasted no time. With Sabrina's information, we reopened the financial claim and submitted a fraud report. By the time Lorna responded to the court summons, it was already out of her hands. The money was frozen. The narrative flipped. She wasn't the heroine of her own rediscovery story anymore. She was just another name in a pattern. And still, I didn't attack her in court. I didn't scream or shame her. I let the truth speak. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally, like a person who had finally realized the fantasy she chased was built on sand. We finalized the divorce 3 months later. I kept the house. The boys stayed with me during the school year. She moved into a small apartment across town. She sees them on weekends, tries to make it up to them. Some days go better than others. As for me, I'm rebuilding. Slowly. I joined a support group for blindsided spouses. I'm spending more time with my kids, real, present time. I even started writing again. Not angry letters or revenge fantasies, just thoughts, reflections, lessons. One night, my younger son asked if I was sad that mom left. I told him the truth. I was sad for what we lost, but not for what we escaped, and not for what's ahead. Because in the end, her betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my part of it. What moment in this story shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments below, and let us know. Would you have confronted Owen sooner? Or done something different? Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions, where the quietest voices often carry the loudest truth.